whether you are a revenue leader, you're trying to be a revenue leader, you're looking for investments either in the public or private markets, or even just asking for your CEO for more dollars, listen to this episode.
Welcome back to Revving Up, the podcast from Revving Consulting, all about revenue growth, revenue operations, and how to scale your sales team. I'm your host, Matt Haller, and I'm joined from my partner, Quang Do. Hey, Quang, how are you?
Hello, everyone.
We are back with another episode, joined by Donald Tucker, the head of corporate development at Dropbox. Last week, we talked to Donald about his career, how he fell into the world of corporate development and tech. And this week, Donald, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience in the boardroom with the term sheets. When founders are going through that fundraising journey, what are some of the things that you've seen and the pitfalls that they can avoid?
Well, there's lots of pitfalls. Every company when they're early stage, and I'll give you a very tech centric because we invest. So my focus, kind of wearing the second hat that I wear, right, in terms of we do the M&A, we do the corporate development. We talked about that a lot last week. The second hat that I wear is a venture investor on the corporate side. And so we listen to tons of pitches. We have portfolio companies that go out for raising capital. And I think, end of the day, the number one thing that I think is challenging these days, especially in tech, is thinking through what is your differentiation story? That's always extremely important. So understanding that. And I say that because these days, everything is available. There's open source, there's libraries, there's tools. Everyone can build pretty much the same thing. I mean, if you think about OpenAI as an example, OpenAI, when it came out with ChatGPT in, late 2022, everybody was mind blown, right? And it was just like, wow, look at this thing. And then how many model companies exist today that didn't exist at all, right? You have Anthropic, you have Mistral, you have Cohere, Elon Musk's Grok, right? He was bitter about OpenAI and he's like, I'm going to start my own. Now you got to be able to raise huge amounts of capital. There are things that have to go into there. End of the day, there's very few barriers on the technology side. And so I think more and more, it's hard to say you have a technology differentiation in the same way. And so I think so many founders struggle to tell the story of why am I truly going to win this, to be honest with you. And a lot of it, honestly, to me, comes down to great, you can build a technology, and usually it's started by technologists, but the go-to-market's extremely important. And so I kind of come back to that. And so, maybe I'll think of a company recently, I won't share their name because they haven't done well, but we fell in love with a company that we knew wasn't differentiated. It felt like a thin layer on ChatGPT, but we bought into hey, you're going to build this great workflow, this great product on top of it. You really understand that workflow. They didn't really have the go-to-market, I would say DNA, right? It was two engineers, it was oh, we're going to find our ICP. We're going to identify them. We're going to test this way or that way. They didn't have enough of a thesis. They didn't have enough there. And so I think if you're a startup and you're coming in, you really need a plan around how are we going to find product market fit, especially when you're early, pre-product market fit? Who is your ICP? How are you going to test that? If that doesn't play out, what's plan B? How do you go through and do that capital efficiently? So many of these startups have an idea that my ICP, right, my ideal customer profile is X, and they die on that hill. And so it's don't just keep throwing money at it if it doesn't work. How do you quickly pivot? And so companies that are thoughtful there, to me, I'm much more excited to back than hey, yeah, this is our ICP, it's the marketing professional. We're going to go at that, And this company that failed, a lot of companies that succeeded in the same space, they found that marketing wasn't quite ready for the solution. They found that learning and development of all places was actually an excellent place to go deploy this technology. And those are the ones that took off, and they were flexible. And I think they all started there. So I think having that kind of view, now when I talk to founders, not that I haven't before, but it's tell me that plan around who that ICP is, how you test that, and how you get there. So that's a big pitfall, especially in a world where technology is being liberated. Everybody can build everything. Give me that kind of unique, how you're going to find that customer, how you're going to find that fit.
It almost feels like 10 years ago, you could find a company that you would acquire specifically for that technology, and product-led acquisitions were fairly common. Now I feel like I just go back to that episode from HBO's Silicon Valley where they're talking about the conjoined triangles of success, and it has to be a push and pull between marketing and sales and engineering. And sometimes it does feel that way because you can build the greatest thing in the world for the ICP and the person you think you're building it for, but in reality, the person who's ready and chomping at the bit, foaming out the mouth, to buy your product, service, or solution could be in an entirely different place in the business.
Absolutely, right? And it's, yeah, you got to be flexible. You got to stay water, right? And you got to be able to pivot. And most good startups have pivoted at some point. So, like, you want to find companies and leaders that can pivot, can see that, can admit they were wrong. I think that's a huge part of it. And I shouldn't say there's no companies that are differentiated. It's just much more rare, I think, than it used to be.
You've been on a ton of boards, right? You've been on probably more boards than most people have work experiences. And I imagine the chief revenue officer or the head of sales is often showing up to these meetings. What differentiates the ones that are showing up well versus the ones that aren't, right? Especially when times are not good, right? When times are good, you're the biggest hero. At times are bad, everyone's like, why do you still work here? And why do we pay you so much?
It's quick, and that can switch quickly, right? I think most CROs, right, like they come in and they want to naturally talk about the wins that they had in the corner, right? And so it's like, hey, we won XYZ deal. Let me on the back, let's celebrate. And I think there's definitely room for that, right? Everybody likes to hear the wins, but like where you should be prepared to spend your time is actually not on the wins, but it's like what didn't go right in the quarter. And so, you see that in deals lost. Let's talk about the deals lost. Why did we lose them? What was the reason behind that? And that's really where you should be like prepared to spend your time, is around that. And then I think good leaders as well. Like a lot of times I've seen like early sales leaders that show up to the board with just that and nothing else. And it's like, okay, well, like walk us through the funnel, like what's actually happening in the funnel and help us understand that, right? And so I have a company right now I'm an investor in. And so they would show up and the board deck would have literally those two slides. It's like, hey, here's the wins and here's the losses. And we talk through those, but it's not executing where we wanted to be executing. And then they'd show, hey, here's the pipeline for the next quarter. The pipeline's robust. And so we're like, okay, great. It's on the come, it's coming. It never came. And so it was like, take us through the funnel. Let's understand where like those problem points are. And that's what the CRO was never like really prepared to do. And so we're like, obviously, if your funnel at the top is very big, but you're closing very few deals, something's falling apart. And where is that? Like, let's walk through each stage of the funnel and let's see where that is breaking, and then let's figure out why. And that's what you want to be talking to the board about. And I think even when times are good, you should be doing that. That's going to make a sales leader stand out, is you're coming to those meetings and you're saying, hey, yeah, we sold X deals. That's great. That's in the past. Let's talk about how we're going to get even better in the future. And here's where I see the friction right now. Like, hey, maybe we fixed our qualification, problem, but end of the day, like people aren't continuing on from our demos or, whatever it may be. Let's talk about where that problem point is or what we can always make better. And I think those are the CROs that do best, honestly.
And that's the difference between a VP of sales and a CRO, right? That somebody who's going to be your VP of sales is a good manager, a good leader. Maybe they're good at kind of the budgeting operational side of the business, but broadly, your chief revenue officer is talking about your revenue engine like its own company. Here is the story. Here's how we make money, how we go to market, the metrics that I use, and where those are at. Then let me double click into my wins and losses, because if I just talk about wins and losses without the context of the rest of the business, I'm losing everything about the engine that I'm trying to build. And it feels like from what you just said, you can almost identify who's really that CRO material versus you're just kind of like experienced seller. Just like that.
I think also like people sometimes are, it's the board. I got to stay high level. You'd be surprised how many boards are excited, especially when it comes to something this important, like digging into the weeds of it. And so 100%, like the CRO has to understand that whole engine, how it works. And then don't be afraid to dig into the weeds, even with the board. I think you'll find they really appreciate it.
Even the board understands red, yellow, and green.
They do. The stoplights are very popular.
Especially. Yeah. Awesome. Donald, in the world of AI, and we talked about this in our last episode, as you mentioned, it's in many ways we're at the beginnings of it, especially when we think about agentic AI and its ability to do much more than what we're already seeing and experiencing. How's that going to impact the go-to-market engine? What parts are going to evolve? What parts are going to stay the same? Are we going to be in a world where we don't have people at all and it's just bots talking to bots? Like, what's your vision here?
I mean, I think there's definitely going to get more efficient, right? You're probably going to have less people at some point. You already see some of the startup categories where you've seen AI just drive revenue numbers for companies. One of those areas is like your artificial BDR, right? That's just out and it's, dialing for dollars, right? Essentially. And so a lot of that, lead gen work, right, can start to be done by AI. And so I do think there's something there, but I don't think it's fully going to be replaced by a human. At some point, you're going to need the human touch to come in. And then it's, at least today, I think it's much more about how do you make salespeople so much more efficient, right? And tools that do that. And so going back to like, how do you take especially the manual work or the work about work out of it? And so like, if you're a salesperson, like what are the things that are work about work? It's like, can I get an email that's almost ready drafted for me in response? Like I get an inbound, hey, I have an AI assistant that's smart enough to see that. It knows what it needs to respond. It's going to draft everything for me, pull the right information. I'm going to review it and then say hit send, right? So there are companies that are focused around things like that. It's the age old, like, I hate to put things in my CRM, right? Like update opportunities. Well, hey, I just had a call, and you already see some of this, but it doesn't do a great job of it. But like intelligently put opportunities into the CRM with next steps, even start to take those next steps, right? I've seen companies that it's like, hey, just provide a deep knowledge base, right? Some of the AI companies that have the most traction today are helping you search and find information in a better way. And so as that salesperson, like if you can have that at your sales fingertips, or you have something that's whispering in your ear, hey, oh, you know what we say to that objection in our playbook is this, or hey, they asked about this, here's the data right back to you. It makes you that much more efficient, right? And so those are the things I think will be exciting. And so you're just going to be able to really focus on your craft versus the work about work. And so I think that's what's exciting. And I don't think anybody will miss that, right? Entering opportunities into the CRM. And I think that's really
Definitely not me. Definitely not me.
Oh yeah. Even as an investor and an M&A guy, every company we've talked to, we put in the CRM. I hate doing it, to be honest with you. So
Yep.
But you have to, right? And I think that there's always been this promise with the CRM that if you put data into it, that we're going to get good insights, be able to run a better business and sales organization. The problem is maybe like 15 people on the planet know how to stand up a good, robust database for the CRM system. And then we spend the rest of our time trying to force fit our business process into that.
Nice.
I think that what you're saying with AI is that almost that database structure, it's not going to go away because the data's got to be stored somewhere, but it's going to be less relevant for the way that your user interacts with that CRM. So in the future, instead of the rep having to log in and being like, okay, I'm going to go to my contacts page and I'm going to click through all that. It should be, I sat down on my desk and AI has organized my calendar, my day. Here's the 3 people you're going to speak to. You spoke to these 2 5 months ago, and this is what you spoke about, and makes the job of selling more about trust, credibility, and the relationship than it is about making sure that the data's right.
100%. That's going to make, I think, the job so much more enjoyable and make people more efficient.
I do want to take a quick pause and take a quick break because when we come back, we're going to talk about some predictions for the market and get really tactical about where we see AI coming in the next 18 months. Stay with us. Welcome back to Revving Up. We are back with some predictions. So Donald, because you're our guest, we want to start with you. So what predictions do you see for the B2B, the SaaS, the AI world over the next 18 months?
I mean, I think a couple things. I think one, I don't want to say it's AI taking jobs, but I do think you're going to see a lot more efficiency start to come out. I think we're already seeing that happen. And I think a lot of it's just going to be, less jobs being kind of available in these areas, people getting more efficient, as we talked about, whether that's salespeople, whether it's customer support, whether it's corporate development. I think that's really going to come to play. And I think it's going to start to happen, more in a real way. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects our economy, because in some ways it's great. Efficiency is great. But as we know, there's always transition periods. So I will leave it at that, but I think that's coming. I think the other thing that you're going to see a lot of is pricing models are going to change with AI and how things are priced in the market. So many solutions today, especially in like software in the world I focus on, is seat-based. And you keep seeing that over and over again. Well, when you're getting kind of to that point of you're getting more efficient and you're getting rid of seats, it's not a great pricing model. If you're pricing by seats and you're driving less seats, well, your revenue's going down. And so a lot more you're going to see usage-based, but even more, I think, outcome-based. And so I think you're going to need a whole new set of infrastructure, one, to be able to enable those kinds of billings. There are some platforms that are coming up and doing that, but it's still very challenging. But once you do it, right, like you're going to have a whole new way of selling and packaging, solutions and software that's going to be outcome. Hey, I got you a lead, or hey, I closed this customer support ticket. Those are going to be what gets billed, as opposed to, hey, I had a button, a seat that was using your software. So those are my 2 predictions over the next 18 months.
good predictions themselves. Quang, what about you? Do anything that's tickling your fancy on what's happening in the next 18 months?
Yeah, I think search is dead for the top 5% of people that are fully engaging in AI. Why that's important is I think 95% of everyone else is still going to continue to use Google, whatever, to find the information that they're looking for. But for the 5% that are fully adopting it, I think we're beginning of that snowball effect, right? To transition to digital and all these other trends we've seen in the past. And what's interesting is, as we know, AI is built off the information that's fed to it, right? And so the progression of these early models are going to be based on what the initial 5% are saying, doing, and how they engage. The only limit I see to AI, at least when it comes to, the LLMs, is amount of data that we can feed it. And that data is coming from a very, small and elite and maybe similarly minded group of individuals. And that's kind of cool, but also kind of weird and scary when you think about that, right? And is it going to tell us exactly what we want to hear? Or is it really going to continue to do what the whole internet is supposed to do, which is try to give us the best information, not just the information that we want to hear or advertisers want to give us. So where that's going to take us, how that's going to impact everything from consumer spending to media to advertising, who knows? But I bet it's coming.
When you say search is dead, it's just a different form of search, right? It's no longer your Google search that's oriented. It's going to be, Chat GPT or whoever, right? Claude, tell me the answer to this. And you're going to get a response as opposed to
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. To dive that deeper, like the current model is built, it's an advertising play, right? Like if you look at what's coming up on the first 3 or 5 results, they're sponsored stuff. There's things that are, and it's so I think in some ways it's a better, more pure way of getting the information you need, but we'll see, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the key's always been data portability, and I
Yeah.
think it's going to continue to be all about data portability. But I think the big change is going to be last 10 years, everything's been about integrations, right? We want to make sure that every product can work really well with something else, and the data is going to be handed off from one thing to another. And that's kind of how we've managed tech stacks. I see a world where we're going to be integrating all of that on the back end, but the actual presentation to the rep and the front-facing folks is going to be only the information that they need. Databases are still going to be important, but I don't want to be having a conversation about what fields need to exist in my CRM because, or at least for different roles, because AI should be making contextual decisions based on what's in the database and what's on that calendar to put the right information in front of the right rep at the right time.
Yeah, the UI is dying in some ways, right? And it's becoming obsolete over time. And you're going to have, whether it's agentic workflows telling you what you need to know or doing workflows off of that data, that's what becomes more important.
Awesome. Well, Donald, thank you for joining us for not just 1, but 2 episodes. I do have one last question I like to ask all of our guests this. So you run corporate development investments. You have a beautiful family, more kids than I can keep track of because I keep on getting the updates. You make time for friends like me. For those who don't know, Don and I go way back. And for a point in time, we used to get together at least every year for Thanksgiving and Friendsgiving. And you work out regularly, which is quite impressive. How do you balance it all? How do you balance work, life, fitness, hobbies, friends? How do you do this? And are you related to William Dafoe?
I still don't see the resemblance, but, so many people have said that now. It's unfortunate. Not that he's a bad looking guy.
I'll create a LinkedIn poll. I'm pretty good
A
at it.
younger, handsomer version. How about that? How you do it all. Sleep is for the weak, Quang. Sleep is for the weak. So where do you find efficiency in your life? And, everything is trade-offs and trying to pick priorities, right? It's the same old thing that everybody deals with. And so, yeah, you just got to do it. And yeah, I probably don't get enough sleep.
Well, a great man told me once, you'll sleep enough when you die. So with that, thank you, sir. Fantastic to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all these great insights.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Take care. See you next week.